The House vote on the Republican Party's budget bill is about to begin. This is the bill that would keep the government running past the end of this month with a key provision. It would also defund Obamacare. Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee, is a member of the Budget Committee with us from Capitol Hill this morning. Congresswoman, thank you for taking a few minutes out to speak with me and Stephanie before this key vote takes place. Here's really the most important question. Why bother with this particular vote? Because, as you know, the bill is going to go to the Senate. The Senate, which is controlled by the other party, is going to strip out the defunding of Obamacare and some other things and try to send a clean bill back to the House, which I presume you're not going to pass.
Oh, you might not be right on all of those points. And let's give the Senate the opportunity to take some action. We've got a hashtag going, Senate must act. It's time for them to stand up and say what they're going to do about the Obamacare defunding. It is what they're going to do about that program. The program's tremendously unpopular. It's not ready for implementation. There are all sorts of problems with the data security, with the exchanges, with insurance rates. And so we're being very watchful. The House will take its action, and we will send it across the dome and see what the Senate wants to do with it.
But, Congresswoman, as a country, we are so fatigued by the government gridlock. Should we really be enthused by a hashtag?
Well, I just think that it's important to know that there are people that are pleased that we are taking an action and are pleased that the Senate is going to take a CR up. You know, Stephanie, we would have preferred for them to be taking budget actions every single year. They've chosen not to do that. They did this year, and so that is why we continue coming back to these continuing resolutions. We're doing everything we can to send bills, legislation, funding measures to the Senate, and we are hopeful that they're going to act on this. Bear in mind, we had over 200 pieces of legislation we sent them last Congress that they never chose to take up and take action on.
Congresswoman, the president spoke about this effort to defund Obamacare at a press conference last week. I just want to remind everybody what he said.
The Affordable Care Act has been the law for 3.5 years now. It passed both houses of Congress. The Supreme Court ruled it constitutional. It was an issue in last year's election, and the candidate who called for repeal lost.
Congresswoman, isn't the president kind of right? This issue, Obamacare, and I respect the fact that that you're not in favor of it, has passed the test, several tests with the American people and the law. At what point, you know, do you give up the fight and accept that it is what it is?
Yeah, well, you know, you don't give up the fight. Just because it's the law doesn't mean it's a good law or a workable law. And bear in mind, Eric,
but Congresswoman, you're right. You're right. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's...
I want you to do this. Go back to what Obamacare was supposed to do in the very beginning. It was to be health insurance access for 46 million Americans, remember? That was the goal. What it has become is a takeover and a nationalization of the healthcare industry. Our hospitals are having to lay off medical staff in order to hire compliance staff to do paperwork. We are seeing insurance rates escalate all across the country. We are hearing from individuals about limitations on access to health care. These are the realities. We're watching poll after poll after poll, even the Wall Street Journal poll. 70% of all Americans do not understand this, and the vast majority of them say, hey, this is going to make our health care worse. I think it's 60-something%. It's going to make our health care worse.
Well,
so this is something that needs a serious revisit. We're saying it is time for us to go back to the drawing board on that. That is why we continue to say delay, defund, repeal, replace. It's a four-step process.
Congresswoman, the issue for Americans ultimately is why use Obamacare as a bargaining chip over the running of the government and ultimately the full faith and credit of the United States. That's what's at issue with the debt ceiling. And more importantly, what happens if the Senate strips out that language and sends what they would call a clean bill back to the House. What does the Speaker then do? Does the Speaker then put it up for a vote? Does the Speaker then, what happens if the Speaker breaks the Hastert rule and tries to pass it, a compromise with Democrats?
We're going to deal with that at that point in time. But let me remind you, the reason you have to deal with Obamacare is because of the impact that it has on the budget. Now, go back and remember, it was to be an $863 billion program. After they passed the bill and read the bill, CBO came back and said, no, the adjusted number is $1.4 trillion. This year, as we built the budget, the number had already grown to $2.6 trillion, and that's before we have the majority of this 20,000 pages of regulation that Obamacare is generating. So this is a serious impact on our nation's budget.
Well,
it is a serious impact as to how we're going to deal with Medicaid expansion, with the exchanges, with the subsidies. Most of the states have opted out of these exchanges. And so what we're looking at are budget pressures that are going to escalate and are not going to diminish.
Congresswoman,
you can go back and look at the TennCare experience in Tennessee.
We will. Congresswoman, I'm afraid we have to run, and I know that you have to get to the vote in the House. House Republicans about to vote on this budget bill.
Eric. Thank you, Stephanie.
We thank you for spending time with us here on Market Makers. Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee.